The eviction notice trembled in Marcus Wright's weathered hands as he sat at his kitchen table, the dim light of a single bulb casting long shadows across the room. 3 months behind on rent. 7 days to vacate. The words blurred as tears threatened to spill. Dad? 8-year-old Lily appeared in the doorway, clutching her worn teddy bear. Are you crying? Marcus quickly wiped his eyes. No, sweetheart. Just tired. He forced a smile. Shouldn't you be asleep? It's nearly midnight. I had the dream again. Lily's voice was small. The one where Mom is trying to tell me something. Marcus opened his arms, and Lily climbed onto his lap, her thin frame a painful reminder of how much weight she'd lost since the accident. 6 months ago, a drunk driver had taken his wife and left Lily with injuries requiring multiple surgeries. The medical bills had devoured their savings, then their future, and now threatened to take their home. What did Mom say this time? He asked, stroking her hair. She said help is coming tomorrow. She said to look for the man with the scar. Lily yawned, her eyelids growing heavy. Is that silly, Daddy? No, honey. Not silly at all. He carried her back to bed, tucking the threadbare blanket around her shoulders. The heating had been turned off last week, and the November chill seeped through the poorly insulated walls of their small apartment. Back at the kitchen table, Marcus stared at the stack of bills. Tomorrow he would have to tell Lily they were moving, to where, he had no idea. His job as a high school janitor barely covered groceries. The hospital was threatening to send his account to collections. His parents were gone, and his wife's family had never approved of their marriage. He was utterly alone. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened the email he'd been avoiding all day. It was from Lily's doctor, confirming she needed another surgery, one their insurance wouldn't cover. $87,000. Might as well be $87 million. He buried his face in his hands. For the first time since the accident, Marcus allowed himself to break down completely, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I'm sorry, Sarah, he whispered to his late wife. I promised I'd take care of her, and I'm failing. When the tears finally subsided, Marcus made a decision. He would sell his wedding ring, the last valuable thing he owned. It wouldn't cover the surgery or the back rent, but it might buy them a few more weeks in a motel while he figured something out. Sleep eluded him that night. He sat by Lily's bedside, watching her chest rise and fall, memorizing every detail of her face. She looked so much like Sarah, the same determined chin, the same gentle curve of her eyebrows. How could he tell her they had nowhere to go? Morning came too quickly. Marcus had just finished making Lily's lunch, a peanut butter sandwich with the last of the bread, when a knock sounded at the door. His heart sank. The landlord, probably, coming to pressure them in person. Instead, a tall man in an expensive suit stood on his doorstep. Late 50s, silver-haired, with sharp blue eyes that seemed to look straight through Marcus. A jagged scar ran from his right temple to his jawline. A man with a scar. Marcus Wright? The stranger's voice was deep, cultured. Yes? Marcus was suddenly conscious of his wrinkled t-shirt and the dark circles under his eyes. My name is Edward Harrington. I need to speak with you about your wife, Sarah. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the November air. My wife passed away 6 months ago. I know. Something like grief flickered across the man's face. That's why I'm here. May I come in? Against his better judgment, Marcus stepped aside. As Edward entered, his gaze swept over the sparse apartment, lingering on the water stains on the ceiling, the patched furniture, the empty cupboards visible through the kitchen doorway. You're struggling, Edward stated simply. Marcus stiffened. We're managing. No, you're not. Edward removed an envelope from his suit jacket. And that's my fault. Your fault? I don't even know you. Edward's fingers traced the scar on his face. But I knew Sarah. 25 years ago, she saved my life. Marcus stared at him. Sarah had never mentioned anyone named Edward Harrington. I was driving too fast on a rainy night, Edward continued. My car went off a bridge. Sarah was 19, working as a lifeguard for the summer. She dove in without hesitation. By the time she pulled me out, my face was sliced open from the broken windshield, and I wasn't breathing. He touched his scar again. She performed CPR for 7 minutes until the ambulance arrived. The doctors said another 30 seconds and I would have suffered permanent brain damage. Another minute, and I would have died. Marcus sank into a chair. She never told me this story. Because she didn't know who I was. I was unconscious, and by the time I woke up in the hospital, she had given her statement to police and disappeared. All I had was a name, Sarah Collins. Sarah's maiden name. Marcus felt the room tilt slightly. I spent years looking for her, Edward said. I wanted to thank her properly. By the time I found her, she was Sarah Wright, married to you, with a daughter. He smiled sadly. I watched from a distance. You seemed happy. I didn't want to intrude. So why are you here now? Marcus asked, his throat tight. Edward placed the envelope on the table. Because I've been monitoring Sarah's life from afar all these years. When I learned of the accident, I started looking into your situation. His eyes were kind but direct. You're about to be evicted. Your daughter needs surgery you can't afford. You're drowning, Mr. Wright. Marcus felt a flash of anger. You've been spying on us? I prefer to think of it as watching over Sarah's family, Edward replied calmly. She saved my life. I owe her a debt I can never repay. We don't need charity, Marcus said stiffly, even as his eyes strayed to the eviction notice. This isn't charity. It's repayment. Edward pushed the envelope toward him. Inside you'll find the deed to a house, fully paid for. It's in your name. There's also documentation for a trust fund for Lily's education and medical expenses. Marcus stared at the envelope as if it might bite him. Why would you do this? Because the night Sarah pulled me from that river, I was driving to end my life, Edward said quietly. I'd lost my wife to cancer. My business was failing. I saw no way forward. I didn't go off that bridge by accident. Marcus looked up sharply. Sarah didn't just save my life, she gave me a reason to live. To make something of the second chance she'd given me. Edward's voice grew stronger. After the accident, I rebuilt my company. It's now worth billions. I've helped thousands of people through my foundation. None of it would exist without Sarah's courage. Dad? Lily's voice came from the hallway. She stood there in her pajamas, eyes wide as she stared at Edward. You have a scar. Just like in my dream. Edward turned, his expression softening. Hello, Lily. You look just like your mother. Mom said you were coming to help us, Lily said matter-of-factly. Edward glanced at Marcus, who sat frozen in his chair. Your mother was a very special person. I know, Lily replied. She's still watching over us. That afternoon, Edward drove them to see the house, a modest but beautiful 3-bedroom home in a good school district, with a fenced yard and a swing set. As Lily ran excitedly from room to room, Marcus stood in the kitchen with Edward, still struggling to process the morning's events. Why didn't you come forward sooner? He asked. Before things got this bad? Edward sighed. Pride, perhaps. I wanted to respect your independence. And truthfully, I wasn't sure you'd believe me or accept my help. He looked out the window to where Lily was exploring the backyard. But when I learned about Lily's need for surgery, I realized my pride wasn't worth her suffering. Marcus followed his gaze. For the first time in months, Lily was smiling, really smiling. I don't know how to thank you. Live, Edward said simply. Be the father Sarah knew you could be. And someday, when Lily asks why a stranger helped your family, tell her about her mother's courage. Tell her that one act of selflessness can echo through decades, changing lives in ways we can never predict. That night, in their new home, Marcus sat on the edge of Lily's bed. The room was painted soft yellow, her favorite color. How Edward had known that, Marcus didn't ask. Daddy? Lily's voice was sleepy. Did Mom really send Mr. Harrington to help us? Marcus thought about coincidences and dreams and debts repaid across decades. He thought about a 19-year-old girl diving into dark waters without hesitation, setting in motion events she could never have imagined. I think she did, sweetheart, he said softly. Your mom always found ways to take care of the people she loved. Even from heaven? Especially from heaven. As Lily drifted to sleep, Marcus went downstairs to find Edward sitting at the kitchen table, looking through an old photo album he'd brought from their apartment. She was beautiful, Edward said, touching a picture of Sarah on their wedding day. She was, Marcus agreed. And stubborn. And brave. He sat across from the billionaire who had changed their lives in a single morning. Tell me about your company. What did you build with the life she saved? As Edward spoke of medical technologies and research foundations, Marcus began to understand the true magnitude of Sarah's legacy. The company Edward had built developed prosthetics for children. The foundation funded research into spinal cord injuries. Thousands of lives improved because one teenage lifeguard hadn't hesitated to dive into dark waters. I'd like to offer you a job, Edward said suddenly. Not charity, you have skills my foundation could use. Your background in education, your experience caring for Lily through her medical challenges. We need people who understand what families go through. Marcus started to protest, then stopped. This wasn't pride, this was purpose. A chance to help other families the way Edward had helped his. I'd like that, he said finally. 1 year later, Marcus stood at a podium, addressing the grand opening of the Sarah Wright Memorial Wing at the Children's Hospital. Beside him stood Lily, healthy after her successful surgery, and Edward, now a close friend and mentor. My wife believed that courage isn't about being fearless, Marcus told the assembled crowd. It's about being terrified and diving in anyway. One act of courage changed not just my life and my daughter's, but thousands of others through a chain reaction none of us could have foreseen. He looked at Lily, who beamed up at him. Sometimes our darkest moments are just the beginning of something beautiful we can't yet imagine. Sometimes help arrives in ways we never expected. And sometimes, the people we love find ways to take care of us long after they're gone. That night, as Marcus tucked Lily into bed, she asked the question she'd been pondering all day. Dad, do you think I'll be brave like Mom someday? Marcus smiled, touching the small scar on her forehead, the only visible reminder of the accident. You already are, sweetheart. Every day. After Lily fell asleep, Marcus sat on the porch swing, looking up at the stars. The crushing weight of impossible choices and desperate fears that had defined his life a year ago now seemed like a distant nightmare. Thank you, Sarah, he whispered to the night sky. For everything you did. For everything you're still doing. From somewhere nearby, a warm breeze stirred the wind chimes Sarah had loved so much, the ones Edward had somehow found and hung on this new porch. Their gentle music filled the night air, like laughter from across the years. A single dad's overnight struggle had indeed ended when a billionaire arrived with a life-changing secret. But the true miracle wasn't the money or the house or even the medical care that saved his daughter. It was the revelation that love creates ripples that continue long after we're gone, that one act of courage can echo through decades, bringing light to places we never imagined it could reach.